attention to what you're seeing right now. This footage was captured by a maintenance worker doing a routine inspection of an abandoned industrial site in rural Nebraska. Look closely at the figure lying among the debris, the white cloth draped over her body, the strange discoloration on her skin, that unnatural rust orange staining on her hands and arms. Notice how still everything is. Too still. This isn't a crime scene photo. This is the moment before emergency responders arrived, before anyone understood what they were looking at, before investigators realized they'd stumbled onto something that would challenge everything they knew about human cruelty. What you're seeing is the aftermath of an experiment so twisted, so unthinkable, that when the truth finally came out, it would shake an entire community to its core. You know that feeling when you're struggling with something deeply personal, something that makes you vulnerable, and then someone appears offering exactly what you need. For 26-year-old Emma Hartley, that person showed up at the worst possible time in her life, and he would turn her desperate hope into a living nightmare. Emma wasn't supposed to be in Cedar Falls, Iowa. She'd grown up in Chicago, built a life there, had dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. But after 3 miscarriages in 2 years and a divorce that left her emotionally shattered, she packed up everything and moved to her aunt's place in this quiet town of just under 9,000 people. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a place to heal. Let me paint you a picture of Emma. She was the kind of person who lit up a room without trying. Friends described her as having this infectious laugh, the type that made everyone around her start smiling too. She volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. She brought homemade cookies to her neighbors. But beneath that bright exterior, Emma was grieving. She desperately wanted to be a mother, and every failed pregnancy had carved out a deeper wound in her heart. That's where he found her. That's where Dr. Richard Navarro saw his opportunity. Emma arrived in Cedar Falls in December of 2013, just as winter was settling in hard across Iowa. Her Aunt Patricia owned a small house on Maple Street and had converted the upstairs bedroom into a cozy space for Emma. Those first few weeks were quiet. Emma would sit by the window watching snowfall, trying to figure out what came next. By January 2014, Patricia gently suggested Emma might benefit from talking to other people who understood what she was going through. That's how Emma found herself at the Cedar Falls Community Center on a Thursday evening in mid-January, climbing those worn stairs to a small room where a support group for women dealing with pregnancy loss met every week. About 8 to 10 women showed up regularly, sitting in folding chairs arranged in a circle. They shared their stories, cried together, supported each other. Emma felt less alone there, less broken. Dr. Richard Navarro started showing up in February. He introduced himself as a holistic fertility consultant, said he'd been working with women struggling to conceive for over 15 years. He had this way of speaking, calm, authoritative, compassionate. He'd sit quietly during meetings, just listening. But afterward, he'd approach individual women, offering encouragement, mentioning that he had some revolutionary new approaches that traditional medicine wasn't exploring yet. Here's what nobody knew. Dr. Richard Navarro wasn't his real name. His actual name was Dr. Marcus Chen, and he'd been stripped of his medical license in California in 2009. Before that, he'd been fired from the Redwood Research Institute after he proposed experiments that his colleagues literally called crimes against nature. Marcus had become obsessed with something he called biological architecture. He believed that human bodies could be fundamentally altered at a cellular level to incorporate non-organic materials, minerals, metals, stone. He thought he could create what he called evolved human forms, people who could withstand extreme conditions, even achieve a form of immortality by literally turning their bodies into living fossils. His colleagues had reported him. The medical board had investigated. He'd lost everything. But he didn't stop. He just went underground. By late February 2014, Dr. Navarro had convinced Emma to come to his wellness center. In reality, it was a converted industrial facility about 40 minutes outside Cedar Falls, hidden down unmarked dirt roads in an area locals called the Old Quarry District. The building had once been used for limestone processing. Now Marcus had transformed it into his private laboratory. Emma thought she was going for fertility treatments, natural hormone therapy, acupuncture, maybe some vitamin infusions. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He was a doctor. He had testimonials. He showed her clinical-looking paperwork. He charged reasonable rates and even offered a payment plan. The treatments started in early March. Twice a week, Emma would drive out to the facility. She'd lie on an examination table while Dr. Navarro administered what he told her were mineral-enhanced hormone injections designed to strengthen her uterine lining. He said the slightly unusual color, that orangish tint, was from iron supplements and completely normal. But those injections contained experimental compounds Marcus had been developing for years: silicate minerals, calcium deposits, growth-altering enzymes. He was literally trying to alter Emma's body at a cellular level, attempting to trigger what he called controlled calcification. By late March, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She was overjoyed. She called her aunt, crying happy tears for the first time in months. She posted on the support group's Facebook page. She started buying baby clothes, setting up a nursery. Everything she'd been hoping for was finally happening. Dr. Navarro told her to keep coming for treatments, said they'd ensure a healthy pregnancy, monitor her progress. Emma believed him. She showed up every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork, through April, May, June, and into the summer. But by July, things started feeling wrong. Emma's skin began developing strange, rough patches along her arms and abdomen. Her joints ached constantly. She felt heavy, like her body was fighting against her. When she mentioned this to Dr. Navarro, he told her it was normal pregnancy symptoms. He gave her additional injections, told her everything was progressing beautifully. The reality? Marcus was documenting everything in detailed journals, photographing Emma's changing body, taking blood samples. He was watching as his experiment progressed, as Emma's body slowly began incorporating the minerals he'd been injecting into her system. By September, Emma was in her third trimester. She looked pregnant, but something was off. Her belly felt harder than it should. The baby's movements seemed sluggish. When Emma expressed concern, Marcus assured her that every pregnancy was different. He increased her visits to 3 times per week. And then came November 3rd, 2014. Emma woke up that morning feeling like something was terribly wrong. The baby hadn't moved in hours. Her abdomen felt rigid, stone-like. She tried calling Dr. Navarro multiple times, but he didn't answer. So she got in her car and started driving toward the nearest hospital. She didn't make it. About halfway there, the pain became unbearable. Emma pulled over at an abandoned rest stop just off Highway 63. She stumbled out of her car, collapsing near an old maintenance shed, and that's where she went into labor, alone and terrified. A truck driver named Dale Morrison found her about 20 minutes later. He'd pulled off to check his GPS and saw Emma's car with the driver's door wide open. When he investigated, he found Emma unconscious, surrounded by what he would later describe to police as something that didn't look like it belonged in this world. Dale called 911, his voice shaking. The EMTs who arrived found Emma barely breathing, covered in that strange clay-like residue. Her hands were stained rust orange. And there, still partially attached, was what remained of her pregnancy, a mass that appeared partially calcified, with sections that looked more like stone than human tissue. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Emma. They'd never seen anything like this. One of them, Maria Sanchez, would later tell investigators that it looked like Emma's body had been turning into something else. They rushed Emma to Mercy Regional Medical Center. The ER staff were completely unprepared for what rolled through their doors. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had been working in emergency medicine for 12 years. She'd seen everything you'd expect in rural Iowa. But when they brought Emma Hartley into her ER that November evening, Jennifer's entire medical understanding got turned upside down. Emma was conscious by then, but barely. She kept repeating the same things. "He did this to me. Don't let him find me." The transformation wasn't supposed to be like this. Her vitals were unstable. Her blood work came back showing abnormal levels of calcium, silicon, and other compounds that shouldn't have been present. And then there was the evidence itself. The ER staff had preserved what they could, knowing it would be crucial. When they examined it under proper lighting, the true horror became apparent. The tissue showed signs of crystallization. Actual mineral deposits had formed throughout what should have been developing human tissue. Dr. Walsh immediately called the Cedar Falls Police Department. This was a crime scene. Detective Sarah Connor arrived at the hospital around 10 p.m. She was a 15-year veteran, heading up the Criminal Investigations Division. Cedar Falls wasn't exactly a hotbed of serious crime, but Sarah had a reputation for being thorough and unshakable. Nothing had prepared her for this case. She sat with Emma for hours that first night. Emma was sedated, drifting in and out, but during her lucid moments, she told Sarah everything. About the support group, about Dr. Navarro, about the facility in the Quarry district, about the injections that had started in March and continued throughout her pregnancy. Sarah listened, taking notes, trying to process what she was hearing, but Emma's stained hands, the medical evidence, the obvious trauma, it was all undeniably real. By 3 a.m., Sarah had assembled a team. She contacted the Iowa Bureau of Investigation. She pulled up property records for the Quarry district, and she started trying to figure out who Dr. Richard Navarro actually was. That's when things got even more disturbing. There was no Dr. Richard Navarro licensed to practice medicine anywhere in the United States. No wellness center registered in Cedar Falls. The address Emma had given them didn't appear on any official maps. Sarah realized they were dealing with someone operating completely off the grid. The next morning, November 4th, Sarah led a team to the coordinates Emma had provided. They wound through those unmarked dirt roads until they found it. A large metal building that looked like any other forgotten industrial structure. They forced entry. What they found inside would haunt every person on that team for the rest of their lives. The main room had been converted into a laboratory. There were examination tables, IV stands, refrigeration units full of labeled vials. The walls were covered with charts showing human anatomy merged with crystalline structures. There were notebooks filled with observations, photographs of women in various stages of pregnancy, X-rays showing skeletal systems with unusual density patterns. But here's what stopped everyone cold. A wall of Polaroid photographs, dozens of them, different women, different stages of whatever horrific process Marcus had been putting them through. Emma was there, but she wasn't alone. "How many victims are we talking about?" Sarah asked. Nobody had an answer yet, but they all knew it was more than one. They found Marcus's journals in a locked office. The detail was meticulous and chilling. He'd documented everything, his theories, his methods, his failures. He called it the Chrysalis Project. He wrote about wanting to transform human biology, to create the next stage of human evolution. There were entries about 3 other women before Emma. Subject A, who'd participated in 2011. Subject B in 2012. Subject C in early 2013. Marcus wrote about how each experiment had failed, how he'd been refining his approach, learning from each attempt. And then there were the entries about disposal, about how he'd managed the outcomes. Sarah's hands shook. They weren't just looking at one victim. They were potentially looking at multiple homicides. The search expanded immediately. Cadaver dogs. Excavation of the property. The story exploded across national news. Mad scientist conducted illegal experiments on pregnant women in Iowa. But Marcus Chen was gone. Vanished completely. No car at the facility. No trace anywhere in Cedar Falls. Law enforcement issued a nationwide alert. Marcus's photo went out to every police department and border crossing. The FBI added him to their most wanted list. Meanwhile, Emma was in the ICU fighting for her life. The compounds Marcus had injected into her over 8 months had caused massive internal damage. Her kidneys were failing. Doctors were trying to reverse a process they didn't fully understand. Her Aunt Patricia sat vigil by her bedside every day. The support group members came to visit, horrified to realize they'd been in the same room with Marcus. Emma would wake up sometimes, ask if they'd caught him yet. Sarah would shake her head, promise they were doing everything they could. Days turned into weeks. The searches continued. They found disturbing evidence buried on the property, remnants of biological material, though badly degraded. The forensics team worked around the clock, and then, on November 28th, they got the break they'd been waiting for. A convenience store clerk in Billings, Montana, recognized Marcus from the news. He'd come in to buy supplies, water, sandwiches, a road map, paid cash. But the clerk, Travis Webb, was a true crime enthusiast. He'd seen Marcus's face on the FBI website that morning. Travis waited until Marcus left, then called 911. Within 15 minutes, Montana Highway Patrol had units on the road. They spotted Marcus's vehicle heading west on I-90. 2 patrol cars moved to intercept. Marcus saw them and tried to run. He accelerated, weaving through traffic, hitting speeds over 90. The chase lasted 20 minutes before spike strips shredded his tires. Marcus tried to flee on foot. Officers tackled him in a parking lot, cuffed him face down on the asphalt. He was screaming about how they didn't understand, how his work was revolutionary. Back in Iowa, Detective Connor got the call. They had him. The extradition took 3 days. When they brought Marcus back to Cedar Falls, there was a crowd outside the police station. Angry residents, media crews, Emma's family and friends. Marcus was led inside in handcuffs, his head down. The interrogation that followed would become infamous. Sarah Connor sat across from Marcus for 4 hours, listening to him explain his philosophy. He wasn't apologetic, he wasn't remorseful, he was angry that nobody appreciated what he was trying to accomplish. "You don't understand evolution," he told her. "I was giving them a gift. I was making them eternal." Sarah kept her voice level. "You hurt Emma Hartley. You injected her with dangerous substances for 8 months. You destroyed her pregnancy." "She rejected the process," Marcus said flatly. "That was a failure of her biology, not my methodology." Here was a man who saw human beings as lab rats, who had taken vulnerable women and subjected them to experiments that belonged in history's darkest chapters. But Sarah needed more than a confession to torture. She needed to know about the others. Over the next several days, through hours of interrogation and forensic investigation, the full scope of Marcus's crimes began to emerge. The first victim, Subject A, had been Rebecca Winters. She disappeared from Portland, Oregon in 2011. Marcus had met her at a fertility clinic where he'd been working under a false identity. Rebecca had died during what Marcus called the initial transformation attempt. He'd buried her remains in an undisclosed location he refused to identify. Subject B was Michelle Torres from Phoenix, Arizona. She'd gone missing in 2012 under similar circumstances. Marcus's journals indicated she'd survived longer than Rebecca, but ultimately her body had rejected the integration process. Subject C was Jennifer Lawson from Cedar Falls itself. Jennifer had disappeared in early 2013. Her family had reported her missing, but investigators had theorized she might have left town voluntarily. Marcus's journals showed Jennifer had come closest to completing the transformation, but had ultimately died from organ failure. And here's where that footage from the pre-intro becomes crucial. The same maintenance company had been contracted to inspect the facility after neighbors reported suspicious activity. They'd sent a worker in September 2014, about 6 weeks before Emma's collapse. When investigators reviewed the company's records, they found video footage from that inspection. The worker had been filming as he documented the facility, and there, in one segment, you could see Emma lying on an examination table in her 3rd trimester, that white cloth draped over her, her hands already showing that rust-orange staining. The worker had filed his report, but hadn't realized he was documenting an active crime. That footage became key evidence. It showed Emma at the facility during her pregnancy, proved Marcus's direct involvement, and established a timeline that contradicted his claims. The defense tried to suppress it, but the judge ruled it admissible. The prosecution also had Emma's testimony. She'd recovered enough to give a full deposition in December 2014. Sitting in that hospital bed, still connected to IV lines, Emma told the grand jury exactly what Marcus had done. She described every injection, every visit, every lie from March through November. Her voice was steady, determined. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Medical experts confirmed Marcus had injected her with experimental formulas containing dangerous levels of minerals and enzymes. They testified these compounds had caused irreversible damage to Emma's reproductive system and created catastrophic developmental issues in her pregnancy. Forensic accountants traced Marcus's movements over 5 years, finding evidence of him operating under multiple false identities, creating fake credentials, establishing facilities in 3 different states. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit built a profile showing Marcus exhibited classic characteristics of a sadistic experimenter, someone who rationalized causing harm as serving a greater purpose, who viewed victims as objects, who displayed no empathy or remorse. By January 2015, the case was airtight. The trial was set for April. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Marcus sat at the defense table showing no emotion as victim after victim's family testified. Rebecca Winter's mother described the agony of not knowing what happened to her daughter. Michelle Torres's husband talked about the missing person investigation that consumed 5 years of his life. Jennifer Lawson's sister broke down, explaining how they'd thought Jennifer had simply abandoned them. And Emma testified. She walked into that courtroom in May 2015 and told her story directly to the jury. She described arriving in Cedar Falls in December 2013, broken and grieving, finding the support group in January 2014, meeting Marcus in February, trusting him in March when treatments began, the joy of pregnancy by late March, the growing fear throughout summer and fall, the horror of realizing what he'd done, the devastating loss, the permanent damage. When asked to identify her attacker, she pointed directly at Marcus. "That man took my hope and turned it into a nightmare," she said. "He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as an experiment, and when his experiment failed, he didn't care what happened to me at all." The defense tried to argue diminished capacity. The prosecution demolished that argument by showing the meticulous planning Marcus had demonstrated. This wasn't someone disconnected from reality. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing took place on June 12, 2015. The courtroom was packed. Marcus Chen was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for Rebecca Winters, Michelle Torres, and Jennifer Lawson. He was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, practicing medicine without a license, fraud, and administering harmful substances for his crimes against Emma Hartley. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole, plus an additional 75 years. As he was let out, Marcus finally showed emotion. But it wasn't remorse. It was rage. He screamed that future generations would understand his work, that he'd been on the verge of a breakthrough. He remains in Iowa State Penitentiary's maximum security unit, where he'll spend the rest of his life. Emma's recovery has been long and difficult. The compounds Marcus injected over 8 months caused permanent damage to her kidneys and reproductive system. She underwent multiple surgeries. She'll never be able to have biological children. Marcus took that possibility away completely. But Emma is a survivor. In 2016, she started a nonprofit called Hope After Harm, which provides support for victims of medical abuse. She travels the country speaking at medical conferences and law enforcement trainings, educating people about predatory behavior in healthcare. She's become an advocate for stronger oversight of alternative medicine practitioners. Her Aunt Patricia still lives in Cedar Falls, and Emma visits often. The two have become powerful voices in the community, pushing for changes that might prevent something like this from happening again. The families of Rebecca, Michelle, and Jennifer finally got some closure. Marcus never revealed where he buried Rebecca and Michelle's remains, but both families held memorial services in 2016. Jennifer's remains were located during excavation and returned to her family for burial. The medical community has used this case as a cautionary tale in ethics courses. Marcus Chen's crimes represent one of the most extreme examples of medical experimentation gone wrong in modern American history. In 2018, Emma was chosen to light the Unity Candle at a national vigil for victims of medical abuse. Standing in front of thousands, she said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. "He tried to turn me into something I wasn't. He tried to transform me into his idea of what evolution should look like. But real transformation comes from surviving the unsurvivable. Real evolution comes from healing the unhealable. And that's something he never understood. Emma Hartley's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of questioning even those we trust, and the power of speaking truth even when that truth is almost too terrible to bear. Today, Emma is 36 years old. She works as a patient advocate at a women's health center in Chicago, where she helps others navigate their medical care. She's dating someone who treats her with the kindness and respect she deserves. She has a dog named Hope and a garden where she grows vegetables every summer. She's living. And that's the best possible ending to a story that tried so hard to take everything from her. Rest in peace to Rebecca Winters, Michelle Torres, and Jennifer Lawson. May their memories be a blessing, and may their stories remind us all to watch out for the vulnerable among us.